Hey LADDIES, this is SuperZomgbBBQ, and I'm finally coming to you with the tokens video I've been promising you guys for weeks. So there's going to be very limited gameplay in this video. It's more about tokens because I keep telling you guys I'm going to tell you how I token my cards and what different techniques there are. And the reason I've released this a little bit later is because a lot of you are only just entering into either epic or legendary tier, and I thought it'd be best for at this point to actually have you guys given the right tools to be able to pro your cards properly. A couple of bits of advice here and there. At the end of the day, what WWE SuperCard Season 2 is designed to give you what you want, to allow you to do what you want with your cards. So you can use the tokens however you like to use them. At the end of the day, it is your choice. But what I might be able to give you is a bit of guidance as to how you should be looking at proing your cards and how you should be looking at using your cards. And there's different ways of doing it. Now, I'm going to start off with Exhibition. Now, Exhibition, there's different game types, of course, in WWE SuperCard, you may know. You've got PCC, you've got Exhibition, you've got Road to Glory, King of the Ring, and you have Ring Domination. Now, there are certain things you should understand. Now, first of all, with Exhibition is all about the best stat at a time. And technically, you could set about all of the modes, but there's different ways that different cards can become really useful. Now, first of all, if you want the best possible Exhibition deck, first of all, you need event cards, which are like the Undertaker and the Sting, which I have here. So you got these two cards, these two babies. Now, these two cards I have leveled up balance. So what I've done with my event cards is I've leveled them up really well in 2 stats, and then kind of lifted up another one that's not quite as strong in, so it's more competitive. So what I did with this one is I leveled up his Sting, I leveled up his power and charisma, so on the same level, ran out at the same level, and then I leveled up his speed just under it. Now if you notice with the Undertaker, I leveled up his charisma quite well, and then actually I leveled up his power just underneath his charisma level. So overall, I made them very balanced cards. Now that's the first trick. Then the second trick is to having cards obviously tagged with those event cards. But if you don't have those event cards, this next tip is best for you. What you want to have is the stats which your event cards or your other cards don't have to their max, and hopefully as compatible tag partners. If I give you an example, the best possible person to have as a tag partner for let's say the Rock as a legendary pro is probably going to be someone like Dean Ambrose, because he's got a high toughness and speed, which means that as a card its overall stats are actually going to end up being far better when you're going into tag matches. Plus Dean Ambrose is a pretty decent card anyway. The toughness and the speed element that come into it are going to help you when it comes to tag matches, but also going to mean that if you was to maximize out on those stats, you could actually seriously do some damage. And he procs in toughness and speed as well. But realistically speaking, it's that link you want as well. Now, when it comes to the other one, you want to be having basically 2 cards that are compatible with your event cards. Again, if you don't have the event cards, you want to be having, let's say, well, I'll show you guys an example. So, for example, let's go to Legendary. We've got the 2 event cards over here. I have a Rock, which is high in power and charisma. And I'm also then going to put in, now I can't use Dean Ambrose in this one, but what, for example, I can use is a Daniel Bryan. Now, Daniel Bryan is not the biggest level in toughness and speed, but it's the best card I have that can do that, which means that he's a pretty decent card to have. Now, because I've got 2 left that are event pros, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to swap that out. I'm actually going to put in another kind of leveled up card, which is going to be a Seth Rollins. Now, the reason I put those in is because they're quite leveled cards. They're quite, they're not in as what we call all-in-one stat or in 2 stats. This is where we actually come to the tokens conversation, because this is the next part and the most important part of this topic, which is what you do with your tokens. Now, as you can see, what I've done with Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins is completely balance them out in 3 stats. Now, this is called the freeway. The freeway basically means you level out ace to that particular stat, which is one of his weaker stats, up, and you have his other 2 stats as being his highest stats when you get the card. For example, Seth Rollins' speed and charisma, up so they are above normal cards, but they're not too seriously overpowered. Now you've got the other route, which is the two-way. Now I'll just show you an example. Let's go to a pro that's a two-way. A two-way is Kofi Kingston. Now you can see he's incredibly weak in power. He doesn't really have a good set of stats in charisma. So the best way to use Kofi Kingston is for him to have a speed and toughness match. Which obviously, if you can get that, fantastic. But speed and toughness is all that Kofi Kingston is really good for. You do also have the likes of Goldust, who exactly the same kind of level of stats. He's great and tough as a charisma, but not very good in anything else. Ryback, power and toughness, you're not going to have him in anything else. The same with Jack Swagger, and the same with Miz when it comes to power and charisma. Now, the other argument you could have for the Miz is that he could potentially have a little bit more speed, but honestly, are you willing to do that to risk yourself potentially losing? When if you level up in power and charisma, you potentially have a really, really good card on your hands, especially for the likes of Road to Glory, for example, or even Exhibition if you was needing a power and charisma card. The Miz isn't bad in those two stats, but that's about it. So cards that are absolutely 100% the best way to freeway are the likes of Shawn Michaels, the likes of Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, The Rock, anything that has got really, really good stats. Now, to know if it's got good stats, you want its final stats to look something like you can see here before you start leveling up in matches. So basically, if I was to show you maybe a card, let's go a bit down, further down the line. Let's go to Bray, because Bray's technically pretty good. Rusev's probably the best example of where the kind of cutoff stops. And that's where you can't really do anything with the card other than give it its just a standard boost up. So let's go to the cards that can be ridiculously overpowered when it comes to tokens. So we have our John Cena here. Now this John Cena, and this is one of the best points about John Cena, is that John Cena's legendary card can be in 1500 in all stats, as can I believe Shawn Michaels, as can The Rock, as can Brock Lesnar. There's plenty of cards that can be. For example, if I wanted to make a totally level John Cena card, it's all about the single cards, and this is the most important thing. Is that with tokens, it's all about where you place the tokens on the single card. With the Pro, you're not really changing much other than giving, let's say, a 27-point boost to one stat, which, you know, could win a match, but it's what you do before it gets to the Pro that influences what happens afterwards. So now I don't have John Cena to Pro, but for example, if I was going to level up his card to be equal pretty much in everything, then I'd be putting 3 in his speed, and I'd be putting maybe 1 in his toughness to level him up. Or I could do 2 in his speed and 1 in his toughness, and 2 in his toughness. Either way, that is a perfectly balanced card, but you don't have that all the time unless you have access to a John Cena card every single day. So basically, you want to be placing your cards on your singles really carefully. Don't just go ahead and place the tokens on it, because you will regret it later on. Place the tokens once you have got a pro card to level it up with, because seriously, you'll regret doing it unless you have done it in absolutely the right level of the stats. Now, the simple rule is that if you want to have a card that is really, really, really awesome, you need to kind of watch other people and watch how they do their cards. But realistically speaking, it's the top 3 stats, which are power, charisma, and toughness on John Cena. You wouldn't really normally touch his speed. John Cena is a bit of an anomaly because as a card, John Cena is one of the only ones that can go over 1500 in stats, as I mentioned, which means he could be really useful for modes like Ring Domination and also for Road to Glory. Now, this is where it gets a bit difficult, because you can make the best exhibition deck you like. You can have every single card exactly as you want it. But if a power match is called and you've got a card that's great and tough as a speed like Kofi Kingston, then you're pretty much screwed. So you have to really choose it very carefully in terms of which cards you play in which way. So my advice is that for your better cards, think very carefully about where you would place them. Now, for example, my Seth Rollins, I'd actually went against the grain. A lot of Seth Rollins are actually leveled in toughness, speed, and charisma. I did mine in power, speed, and charisma. And the reason I did that is because it would be another Seth Rollins card. It would also be a Daniel Bryan card, for example, in most occasions. And that's what I was looking for from it. Plus, I've already got a toughness card and Undertaker, so if I was using these two together, it would actually be a pretty good match. So yeah, that's the reason I decided to do that. And if I wanted to do it on the other side, you know, you could use my Daniel Bryan and my Sting together, and they would actually be pretty good combination as well. So the freeway is where free set stats to level up to create what we call a freeway statted card. So you can have a John Cena that is great in power, toughness, and charisma. Awesome, thank you very much. You would probably, in that case, put in... Let's go back to John Cena again to show you. Actually, let's use some real-life examples of a good freeway. Now, a good freeway is going to be the likes of Edge. So this is one I've just done. He's not fully leveled yet, but I did his power up, his speed up, and his charisma up. And the reason I did that is his main stat is in speed, his lesser stat is in power, and his third stat is in charisma. And you kind of choose between toughness and charisma. I chose charisma just to kind of keep him leveled up, then to make him maybe be another edge card in that level. But overall, that card is going to be really good for things like Road to Glory. Now, if I was to look at a different card that was maybe more based for exhibition, I would go for a two-way card. Now, the two-way card is this Booker T. I leveled this Booker T specifically up to be a speed demon. That's all I wanted from Booker T because his card was amazing in terms of speed and charisma. Now, it's not obviously the fastest card because you'd have Seth Rollins and stuff like that, but that's what I wanted to use Booker T for. Now, he would be great in exhibition, great in People's Champion, but he wouldn't be that great in the other game modes I mentioned, which are the Ring Domination and Road to Glory. In fact, he'd be pretty useless because... if anything, as long as speed and charisma came up, that's great. You know, you'd win. But if speed and charisma didn't come up, you'd have to be hoping that a card that came that was actually leveled down a little bit, and you'd have a bit more of a problem there. Now, my simple advice is if you think a card is really worth it, and you've got really two sets high stats, like that Kofi Kingston card, or the Stardust card here, you go ahead and do it. I mean, this is another example of a two-way, great charisma, iffy speed, iffy toughness, iffy power. So we can have, for example, for freeway, we got Daniel Bryan, we got Brock there, so this is my Brock Lesnar. Power, toughness, and speed to level up all stats to 1500. But I could have easily made his charisma may go 1500 as well if I wanted to. But I decided not to, and that's the same that would happen with a Rock. Now, my advice for where you place other methods that people have chosen is I would not place your tokens on the proc. Now, the reason why I'm going to show you this is actually I made a mistake myself when I first got my hands on Season 2. When I got my Legendary Pros, I leveled up a certain cards in a certain way that meant that their proc was so powerful that it would beat anyone. But, you know, you've only got 33%, that's a 1 in 3 chance of actually having it activated. So there's no real reason to put the proc in. And definitely my number one piece of advice is don't waste the tokens on a single card in the proc. If you're going to waste a token because maybe it's really overpowered, waste it in the stat, especially if it's an event card that it may be not everyone else is going to use. So for example, if you had the Sting card, I advise someone to put one token, once it was pro'd, into the toughness category. The reason for that is because not many people are going to touch toughness. So if it comes to a toughness match and you've got no supports left and it's maybe the last match, you're going to win that match. So that's just the way of thinking about it, is having that one extra token placed in a different area. Do you really need a proc that's going to be 1 out of 3 times? Or would you be better off putting it in power and charisma or speed? Now, this Triple H, actually, I probably could have leveled up if I'd done it better in power, toughness, and charisma. So I probably could have had actually a really stat-heavy card there. But I decided not to and decided to go for the proc route, which has helped me. But you know, it's not really helped all that much. Randy Orton's the same. This is just not advisable. It's not advisable at all. It will work out for you a third of the time. So if you are really willing to risk it, fine, go ahead. But honestly, do not use tokens when in the proc, especially not in the singles. It's too important. And I cannot establish to you guys any more than I already have. It is absolutely 100% the most important thing that you do not use it in the ability for your tokens, whatever tier you're in. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you is Epic tier. Now, Epic tier, when it comes to tokens, is purely down to you, but there are some really good cards that can actually go over 1,000 stats in everything. Now, that's dependent upon what you want the card for. There are a certain amount of cards that can go over that 1,000 barrier. That's The Rock, that's Stone Cold, that's Nikki Bella. I believe Brie Bella can go over it as well can Paige. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the difference between having a card pro'd without having the tokens in the right areas and having the right areas for the single card compared to when you do it for the pros. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to unlock all of these Shawn Michaels. I've got 4 Shawn Michaels here, all leveled up to the maximum. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine one without the tokens in place. Okay, so I'm literally just going to show you the difference it has. Now, none of these have had their matches played, so the stats are going to be slightly less. But if we just combine one of these, okay, together, I'll show you this now. So that's just showing you the stats. So we've got 505, 519, 512, 526. Okay. Now, if we show you the difference now between that and having the tokens in place, you'll see how much of a difference those tokens being in the right areas has on those cards. So let's just go to improve. We've got 4 tokens to spend. Now, I am going to make this Shawn Michaels card good in toughness. And I'm going to make him good in speed, charisma, and I'm also going to put another one in speed. So I'm going to confirm those, and I'm going to go to the next card, which I have just along here. Let's get to Shawn Michaels again, and I'm going to put his one in. This is something else you can do. You can put 2 in toughness, 1 in speed, 1 in charisma, and then overall his stats will kind of level up. So you press confirm, and the stats are in the right place for me to then pro that card. But let's see how much of a difference this has on the Shawn Michaels card in terms of the overall stats. Now, what you'll notice between those is there's not actually the same gap that I actually created in the overall stats. The stats went up per stat by 7, okay? So 7 per token. Now, if you actually add these up between the two cards, they've actually gone up by 23 instead of 21 in the ones that I put 3 tokens on. Once I put 2 tokens on, it's gone up by a different amount. I'm just going to think about it here. 15, I believe it's gone up by 15. So you'll notice that by putting these tokens onto it beforehand in the right areas, it makes a huge difference. It's not necessarily to a massive stat difference, but once you level the cards up, once you've done all the matches, which will give you the pros, just look at that mispro'd Shawn Michaels as an example. The amount it actually potentially has an effect on is huge. So it's always best to have it go in the right stats because it will make a huge difference. If you're going to make a toughness, speed, and charisma related Shawn Michaels, then you definitely don't want to put in anything in power up front. If you want to put it in at the end, different story. But make sure that the first one you put in, first card tokens you put in, is in toughness, speed, and charisma. We'll ignore the power until later on if you need to. Otherwise, potentially, you're not going to get the best out of the card. And it is important to understand that there are some cards, especially the event cards, that do actually have a boost in certain stats. For example, Sting had a boost once you pro'd him in his power stat. There are other certain cards as well, such as The Undertaker. I believe some of the higher up legendary cards that actually have a higher boost in certain stats when you're leveling them up in either singles or in pros. It's important to take advantage of those. When I say take advantage of those, because that will give you extra stat points. Even though it seems like 1 per stat, for example, Sting's was a plus 12 instead of a plus 11, or a plus 11 instead of plus 10. Those 3 stat points potentially make a massive difference between you winning and losing. So always take advantage if a card is giving you more stat points for one particular stat, and then be creative with the other ones around it, or two particular stats, for example. I mean, I remember one card I did had it was great in power, toughness and speed, but the charisma, it was going up at like a lot, but 1 point less. I believe that I think the Taker event card will go up in toughness a lot more than in power and charisma, and then speed was even worse. 4 tips around tokens are very, 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 very simple. Number 1 is don't put the tokens on a single legendary card unless you are absolutely confident that you know what you're doing. If you're in the legendary tier for the first time and you've got potentially get your first pro, don't put it in the tokens until you've got the other card available, especially if you've got a Ring Domination or Road to Glory reward that's coming up that gives you the pro. My advice there, I'd focus more on leveling up on the matches than with anything else. Tip number 2 is don't put the tokens in an area where you're not going to use it in. I would advise either a 3-way or a 2-way method where you put it in the 2 strongest stats or the 3 strongest stats, unless you have a card that is absolutely monstrous. Let's say like a Brock Lesnar or a John Cena legendary tier, or the Rock in legendary tier, for example, that can reach up way and way above any other card in terms of its stats if you was to make it an all-round card. Number 3, very, 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 very simple. Don't put any tokens in the proc for your single card, and I wouldn't put it in the pro either unless you are really struggling to find it or you want to be a bit different. And number 4, very, 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 very simple. Do your research. Look around. Everyone is showing off their decks in Road to Glory, Ring Domination, their games in the exhibition, King of the Ring decks. Do a little bit of research. If you know that someone's got a fully leveled John Cena and you want to have a John Cena that's just as good or better than theirs is, do your research. It's definitely going to help you. It's going to make you put it in a better place for the events, and potentially you may face that person. That person may have a card that is weaker than yours. And as I get that, I'm going to get myself a network error, so I'm actually going to class this as the end of the video. And thank you very, very, very much for watching. I hope that I've been really useful to you, and if you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below. If you have any questions about what I've mentioned, please hit me up on Twitter. Please leave comment questions in the comment section as just mentioned. I'll see you later, guys. Zolive!